You know what's funny about abandoned houses? They wait. They don't just sit there empty. They wait for someone who sees past the dust and the overgrown weeds. Someone who looks at peeling paint and broken shutters and thinks, this could be home. Jack saw it that way. The old house sat about a kilometer from his farm. 2 hectares of good land, fruit trees ready for harvest, a concrete road running straight in. Uncle Truong was selling it. His kids had moved away for work, and the place had been sitting empty for years. When Jack walked through that door for the first time, most people would have seen a wreck, cracked walls, spider webs in every corner, grass so tall it brushed against the windows. But Jack didn't see a wreck. He saw Tien raising chickens in the clearing. He saw her tending a vegetable garden. He saw the 2 of them sitting on that front step at sunset, tired from the day's work, happy in a way money never bought. So he negotiated. He got Uncle Truong down to 180 million dong. He shook hands on it. And then he went to work. It starts with grass. That's the thing nobody tells you about starting over. You don't begin with grand gestures or dramatic declarations. You begin with a machete and tall grass that needs cutting. Jack spent his afternoon clearing the area where Tien mentioned she'd like to raise chickens. Swing after swing, watching the grass fall in neat rows, feeling the sun on his back and sweat soaking through his shirt. Simple work, good work. He thought about her while he worked. Tien had been at the market that morning, selling cucumbers from Aunt Lynn's garden. She'd wake before dawn, pick the freshest ones, load them into baskets, and spend hours in the heat negotiating prices with grandmothers who wanted the crispest cucumbers for the lowest price. 10,000 dong per kilo, 12,000 if they were really fresh. She'd come home with maybe 50,000 or 60,000 dong profit and act like she'd won the lottery. That's who she was, someone who saw value in small things, who saved every dong not because she was cheap but because she wanted to help. Jack swung the machete again. The grass fell. He'd told her he was handling the financial pressure, told his mom the same thing. Trust me, he'd said, I've got this under control. And he did, mostly. He'd sold his car, delegated the construction projects to Fook, his new assistant, rearranged his company responsibilities so he could spend more time out here, doing the work that mattered. But here's the thing about the people who love you. They know when you're carrying weight, even when you smile and tell them everything's fine. His mom had tried to sell her gold rings, the ones he'd given her over the years, each one a memento of his love and success. Gold is expensive right now, she'd said, slipping them off her fingers like they were nothing. I'll sell these, and when the price drops you can buy me new ones. Jack had stopped her, put the rings back on her hands himself. These aren't just gold, Mom. They're us. Our story. You don't sell that no matter what. She'd cried a little. Told him she was worried. Told him she knew the company required capital, and now he had her passbook to redeem and maybe she should do more to help. He'd held her hands and repeated it. Trust me. And she did. Because that's what mothers do. Tien did the same thing, in her own way. She worked harder at the market, picked extra bamboo shoots from the garden and sold those too. Came home with a little envelope of cash she'd saved from her sales, offering it to him with both hands like it was a fortune. It's not much, she'd said, eyes hopeful and worried at once. But I want to help. He'd taken it. Not because he needed it, though every dong mattered these days, but because refusing would have hurt her. Because her love language was contribution. Because she needed to feel like they were in this together. Let me ask you something. When was the last time someone offered you their widow's mite and meant it with their whole heart? Jack cleared the last section of grass and stood back to look at his work. Clean ground now. Room for a chicken coop. Maybe some pig pens if Tien wanted. The house itself would take more effort. It needed repairs, a good cleaning, probably some structural work, but it was solid. Built well, just neglected. Like a lot of good things, it only needed someone to care. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and walked to the house. The door creaked when he opened it. Inside, everything was covered in dust. The furniture was still there. Old wooden chairs, a table, some cabinets. The previous family had left in a hurry, or maybe they'd just stopped caring. Either way, the bones were good. Jack walked through each room slowly. Kitchen, bedroom, small storage area. He opened windows to let air in. He could already picture it. Tien cooking in that kitchen. The 2 of them sleeping in that bedroom. A life built on their own terms, away from his father's control and the constant pressure of the corporate world. Peace over power. That's what this place represented. He was so lost in the vision that he didn't hear her approach. Jack, he turned. Tien stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of sugarcane juice, her face flushed from the heat. She must have seen him working from the road and stopped by. "You came home early today," she said, smiling. "I wanted to get this place ready for you," he replied. "For the chickens you mentioned." Her eyes went soft, that look she got when he did something thoughtful. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." She walked over and handed him the juice. He drank it in 3 long gulps, grateful for the sweetness in the cold. She watched him with that expression he'd come to treasure. Part admiration, part concern, all love. "It's getting late," she said gently. "Maybe you should come home and rest. You can finish tomorrow." But here's what nobody saw coming. Jack wasn't just clearing grass and cleaning a house. He was building an answer to a question his father had been asking for months. "What's your plan? How are you going to prove you can live this way?" This house was his proof. This land was his answer. And tomorrow, when Tien came home from the market with her small earnings and her big heart, he'd show her what he'd been working on. He'd show her the future they were building, one machete swing at a time. She didn't go straight home. Tien watched Jack work for another moment, then nodded and headed back toward their house to start dinner. But something in her chest felt tight. Not bad tight. The opposite. The kind of tightness you get when you realize someone sees you, really sees you, and is building something around that vision. Chickens. He remembered she mentioned chickens. Most men would have nodded and forgotten. Jack had bought land. She walked the kilometer back home with the empty juice cups, her mind spinning. The cucumbers had sold well today, better than usual. She'd made about 60,000 dong after expenses. Not much by Jack's standards, but she'd been saving, hiding little envelopes of cash in her drawer, planning to give them to him when the moment felt right. Because she knew, she wasn't stupid. Jack had sold his car. He'd delegated his construction projects. He was telling everyone he had things under control. But Tien had watched him late at night when he thought she was asleep, sitting at the table with paperwork, rubbing his temples, doing calculations on scraps of paper he'd burn in the morning so she wouldn't see them. He was protecting her from the truth, and she loved him for it. But she also wanted to carry some of the weight. Here's the thing about love between two people who've both known hardship. It's not about grand gestures. It's about the quiet arithmetic of partnership. You pick cucumbers, I'll clear grass. You save your envelopes, I'll sell my car. We'll meet in the middle and call it home. Tien reached their house and went straight to work. She'd promised him bamboo shoot rolls for dinner, his favorite. The bamboo shoots were already prepped from yesterday, so she just needed to season them, stuff them and steam them until they were tender. Simple food, the kind that tastes like care. While she worked, she thought about the fake gold necklace. She'd bought it for him months ago from a street vendor, 200,000 dong. At the time it felt like a fortune. She'd wanted to give him something nice, something he could wear and think of her. She didn't know it was fake. The vendor had sworn it was real, and she'd believed him because she didn't know any better. Jack had never said anything. He'd worn it proudly, smiled every time she noticed it around his neck. But she'd seen him looking at it lately, seen the slight discoloration, the tarnish that real gold wouldn't show, and she knew he knew. The fact that he kept wearing it anyway, that told her everything. Let me tell you what happened next, because this is where the story shifts. Jack came home just after sunset, covered in dirt and grass stains, smelling like honest work. Tien had the bathroom ready, clean clothes laid out, water heated, everything prepared. She poured him a glass of water and made him sit while she massaged his shoulders. "You're going to hurt yourself working like this," she said softly. "I'm fine. Actually feels good to use my hands again." She didn't argue, just worked her thumbs into the knots in his shoulders until he relaxed. Then she sent him to shower while she finished the bamboo shoots. That's when it happened. Jack was in the bathroom, and Tien was in the kitchen, and the whole house smelled like steam and seasoning, and the particular comfort of two people building a life together. The kind of moment that doesn't announce itself. It just settles over you like evening light. Jack came out of the shower clean and tired in the good way. They ate dinner outside under the moon, bamboo shoot rolls, rice, vegetables from the garden. The cat wandered over looking for scraps. The dog was probably off somewhere, maybe pregnant according to Tien's observation. The cicadas were so loud they almost drowned out conversation. Almost. "The moon is beautiful tonight," Tien said. Jack looked up. She was right. Full and bright, turning everything silver. "The storm season's coming," he replied. "I'll need to reinforce those young trees we planted. I'll help you. You don't have to. I want to." And there it was again. That arithmetic. That division of labor that wasn't really division at all, just two people multiplying each other's strength. They finished eating. Tien started to clear the dishes, but Jack stopped her. "Leave them. I'll wash them later. You're tired. So are you." They sat there for another moment, neither one moving, both knowing something was about to happen but not quite sure what. Then Tien reached into her pocket. "You know what breaks my heart? When someone offers you everything they have and apologizes that it isn't more. She pulled out a small envelope, thin, probably didn't have more than 50,000 or 60,000 dong inside. She held it out to him with both hands, like it was a treasure. "Jack, take this." He looked at the envelope, then at her face. "To Tien, please, I know it's not much. I know compared to what you earn, it's nothing. But I've been lucky with business these past few days, and I've been digging bamboo shoots, and this is what I saved. I still have money for groceries. This is extra. I want you to have it." Her voice cracked just slightly on the last sentence. "If you don't take it, I'll worry all night. I want to be beside you in difficult times. I want you to share with me, please." Here's what nobody tells you about accepting help. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone give, not because you need what they're offering but because they need to offer it. Because their identity is wrapped up in contribution, and refusing them is refusing who they are. Jack took the envelope. "Thank you to Tien." She smiled, actually smiled, like he'd given her a gift instead of the other way around. "You know," she said quietly, "every time I go harvesting or sell at the market, I think about you. You're my motivation. When I think about you, I don't feel tired anymore." He opened his mouth to respond, but she kept going. "I know this money isn't much, but it's my heart. It's me saying, I see you working. I see you trying. And I'm here. We're doing this together." Jack looked down at the envelope in his hands. He could feel the bills inside. Maybe 60,000 dong. Maybe less. In the world he came from, the world of construction contracts and corporate accounts, this was pocket change. Less than pocket change. But here's the thing about widow's mites. They're never about the amount. They're about the proportion. Tu Tien had given him everything extra she had. She'd picked cucumbers in the heat, negotiated with grandmothers, dug bamboo shoots from the garden, and saved every single dong so she could hand it to him and say, "I'm with you." "That's not nothing. That's everything. I'll keep this safe," he said. "And if you need anything at all, you tell me, okay?" They sat there under the moon, the envelope between them like a covenant. The dog wandered back looking for food. Tu Tien scooped some rice into a bowl for it, singing softly while the cicadas chirped and the night settled in around them. And Jack thought, this is what I'm fighting for. Not the company, not his father's approval, not the construction projects or the corporate success or any of it. A woman who gives him her last dong and calls it joy. A life built on bamboo shoots and moonlight, a future that smells like honest work and steam and seasoning. Tomorrow he'd go back to the old house, he'd keep clearing, keep cleaning, keep building their answer. But tonight he'd sit here with Tu Tien and let her love him in the only language she knew: provision, partnership, presence. And here's what nobody saw coming. That fake gold necklace Tu Tien had given him months ago. Jack had discovered it was fake that very evening, when he'd taken his shower and noticed the heavy tarnish. He'd taken it off, held it in his palm, and made a quiet promise. Someday I'll replace this with real gold. Someday I'll give her everything she deserves. But for now, he'd keep it. Because it wasn't about the gold. It was about what the gold represented. A girl who saved 200,000 dong to buy something nice for the man she loved, who didn't know it was fake, who gave it anyway, with her whole heart. That kind of love, you don't replace it, you build a house around it. Morning came the way it always does in the countryside. Roosters first, then the gradual lightening of the sky. Blue-black turning to gray, turning to that particular gold that only happens right before sunrise. Jack woke to the sound of Tu Tien moving quietly in the kitchen, trying not to disturb him. The smell of rice porridge, the soft clatter of bowls. He lay there for a moment, listening. This was the life his father couldn't understand. The CEO who built an empire on concrete and steel and 20-hour workdays couldn't fathom why his son would choose this. Early mornings and simple food and a woman who measured wealth in envelope of small bills. But Jack understood something his father didn't. Power is temporary. Peace is permanent. Control is exhausting. Partnership is restful. You can build an empire and lose yourself. Or you can build a home and find yourself. He got up. Tu Tien heard him and turned, smiling. "I made porridge. And there's leftover bamboo shoots from last night. Perfect." They ate quickly. Tu Tien was heading to the market again. There were more cucumbers to pick from Aunt Ling's garden, and she'd heard from another vendor that bamboo shoots were selling especially well this week. Every dong counted. Jack watched her gather her baskets and check her small bag for change. She moved with purpose, efficiency, the kind of grace that comes from years of making something from nothing. "Be careful in the heat," he said. "I will. What about you?" "I'm going back to the house. Want to get more done before it gets too hot." She nodded, then hesitated. Jack, that money I gave you last night, it's safe. I'm keeping it somewhere special. Her face relaxed. Good, okay, I'll see you tonight. She kissed his cheek and left, baskets swinging from her shoulders, already calculating how many kilos she could sell and at what price. And Jack, he finished his porridge, changed into work clothes, and headed back to the old house. Here's where the story accelerates. Because while Jack had been clearing grass and making plans, something else had been happening. Uncle Dung, the former soldier who wanted to retire to farm life, had heard about the land purchase. He'd called Jack that morning, excited. Is it true? You found a place? I did. 2 hectares. House needs work, but it's solid. Fruit trees ready to harvest. Can I see it? Come by this afternoon. I'll show you around. That conversation changed everything, because Uncle Dung wasn't just looking for land. He was looking for what Jack had already found, a way out of the corporate grind, a return to something real. Jack worked through the morning. He cleared more of the overgrown vegetation. He swept out the house, room by room, opening windows to let fresh air chase out years of staleness. He checked the structure, solid wooden beams, good foundation, roof intact despite some missing tiles. The place had been built right, it just needed someone to care again. Around noon, Uncle Dung arrived. He walked the property slowly, a former soldier's eye assessing terrain and resources. He checked the water source, a clean mountain spring. He examined the fruit trees, oranges, grapefruit, lemons, betel nut, all mature and productive. He stood in the clearing Jack had made and nodded. This is good land. It is. And you're really doing this? Leaving the company? Jack paused. That was the question, wasn't it? The one everyone kept asking in different ways. His mother asked with worried eyes. His father would ask with anger when he found out. Even Tien asked sometimes, though she phrased it as concern for his well-being. But here's the truth nobody wanted to hear. He wasn't leaving the company. He was leaving the life the company represented. The performance, the constant proving, the measuring of worth by quarterly returns and market position. I'm building something different, Jack said finally. Something that doesn't require me to sacrifice everything else to maintain it. Uncle Dung understood. He was doing the same thing. Your father won't like it. My father doesn't have to live my life. They walked back to the house. Jack showed him the interior, explained his vision for renovations, for making it livable again. Uncle Dung listened and occasionally offered suggestions. Reinforce this beam. Replace those tiles. Consider adding a covered area for rainy season work. Practical advice from someone who understood what Jack was trying to build. You know what I think? Uncle Dung said as they sat on the front step. I think you're braver than you realize. It's one thing to walk away when you have nothing to lose. It's another thing entirely to walk away when you're successful, when people expect you to keep climbing. Jack didn't respond immediately. He looked out at the clearing, at the fruit trees, at the concrete road leading back to civilization. It's not brave, he said finally. It's just necessary. I can't keep living for other people's definitions of success. Does Tien know how lucky she is? That made Jack smile. I'm the lucky one, and he meant it. Because here's what he'd learned over these past months of transition. Tien didn't love him for his money, or his status, or his family name. She loved him for who he was when all that was stripped away. She loved the man who cleared grass and fixed houses and ate bamboo shoot rolls under the moon. That man was worth more than any empire. Uncle Dung left around mid-afternoon, promising to talk to Uncle Truong about similar properties. Jack stayed. He worked until sunset, patching, cleaning, organizing. His hands got blistered, his back ached, his shirt was soaked through with sweat, and he'd never felt better. Because this was honest work. This was building something that mattered. Every board he reinforced, every window he cleaned, every section of grass he cleared was a brick in the foundation of their future. When he finally headed home, the sky was turning orange and purple. The cicadas were starting their evening song. He could smell cooking fires from distant houses. Tien was already home. She'd had another good day at the market, sold all her cucumbers and most of the bamboo shoots. She was in the kitchen preparing dinner, humming to herself. Jack stood in the doorway watching her for a moment. This exact moment. This was what he'd been working toward. Not the house itself, though that mattered. Not the land or the fruit trees or any of it. What mattered was this. Coming home to someone who chose you, who saw you at your dirtiest and most tired and loved you more, not less. Who measured your worth not by what you produced but by who you were. You're staring, Tien said without turning around. I'm admiring. She laughed. Go shower. Dinner's almost ready. He did. And while he showered, washing off the day's work, he thought about the fake gold necklace he'd tucked away in his drawer. About the envelope of money she'd given him, which he'd hidden in the same place. about all the small gifts and gestures that made up their relationship. None of it was valuable by conventional standards, all of it was priceless. After dinner, simple rice and vegetables and fish from the market, they sat outside again. The moon was rising. The dog had indeed been pregnant. Tien had confirmed it that afternoon when she'd checked. In a few weeks there would be puppies. I've been thinking, Tien said quietly, about the house you're fixing up. Yeah? When it's ready, could we live there? Just us? Jack looked at her. She was nervous, asking. Like she thought maybe she was overstepping. Like this house was his project and she was just along for the ride. Tien, that house is us. Every board I fix, every window I clean, I'm doing it for you. For this, for the life we're building. Her eyes filled, not with sadness, with something else. Relief maybe. Recognition. I want to help, she said. With the renovations, I can paint and clean and I know you can. And I want you there. I want us to build it together. She smiled then, full and bright. The kind of smile that makes everything else worthwhile. And here's how the story ends, at least for now. Jack kept working on the house. Tien joined him on her free days, the two of them side by side, turning an abandoned structure into a home. Uncle Dung found his own property nearby and started his own renovation. Jack's mother visited once and cried happy tears, seeing her son so content. The construction projects continued under Folk's management. The company kept running. Jack's father didn't approve, but Jack didn't need his approval anymore. Because he'd found something better than approval. He'd found purpose, partnership, peace. He'd found a woman who gave him her last 60,000 dong and called it love, who bought him fake gold and meant it as treasure, who picked cucumbers in the heat so she could contribute to their shared dream. That's not a small thing. That's everything. The house came together slowly. New roof tiles, painted walls, reinforced beams, a proper chicken coop in the clearing, a small vegetable garden starting to take root. And every evening, Jack and Tien would sit on that front step, the one Uncle Dung had sat on, the one that had weathered years of neglect, and watch the sun set over their 2 hectares. Their home, their choice, their future. Built not on grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but on cucumber money and bamboo shoots and fake gold necklaces that meant more than real ones ever could. Because love isn't about what you can buy, it's about what you're willing to build, together. One swing of the machete at a time.